All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here with someone who is a past guest on the show, but we're in a very different context here. The last time this guest was on the podcast, we were talking about a band, and now we're talking about a solo project. And there's a lot to get into, so I think the best way to start this off is, as always, for the guest to introduce himself and give a bit of background about what it is you do as an artist.
Hey, I'm Ben Rüsch. I was the drummer and one of the founding members of a Winnipeg prog band called Providence. And we did an album. And as we talked about last time, we did the album. And of course, COVID hit and we went into pandemic lockdown. And we were planning to do shows and stuff, and everything kind of fell by the wayside. And so basically what happened was I was stuck in a studio with a bunch of gear, no band, and no chance of getting out and touring and promoting this new album that we did with Providence. So, I started off by feeling kind of sorry for myself. I spent a bunch of time in front of the TV with the cats watching Star Trek and Star Wars, thinking, okay, eventually I'll get out of my rut, but I didn't. It was a long winter, and I thought, I've got all this gear downstairs. Why the hell don't I go downstairs to the studio? Because the studio's in my house.
That's convenient.
Right? Why don't I go downstairs and see if I can figure this shit out and see if I can do something with it? So the first thing I did, like when everything went down, my bass player moved to PEI. My guitar player, we're a three-piece band.
Yeah.
My guitar player was doing his own thing or whatever, but I reached out to my bass player, who was our recording engineer with Providence and everything, and I said, hey, if I start messing around with this stuff, am I going to break anything? And he says, hell no, just go down there and just start mucking around with it and see what you come up with.
Yeah.
So I thought, dude, that's awesome. Okay, so I went downstairs and I opened up the DAW and like, I've been surrounded by all this gear for so long, but I never had the nerve to touch it because I was the drummer guy.
Yeah,
right?
you're at the back.
Yeah, I'd hang out in the back and I wouldn't worry about it because Todd was going to look after recording everything. Todd was going to look after mixing everything and everything. Like I didn't have anything to worry about. I'd just bring down another bag of chips and some more beers for the boys, and let's have a pleasant visit. So anyway, I'm confronted with all this technology and stuff, and I'm like, holy shit, like, where do I even begin? So I just started noodling around with it. Luckily, I had a DAW that was user-friendly and intuitive. So, okay, you open up a track and, turn on a synthesizer and run it through the mixing board and see what happens, and stuff started happening. It's like, whoa, this is not as hard as I thought it was going to be. And part of it was laying down a drum track, and then, okay, so drumming is what I do. So drum track, the hard part was synthesizers. I'm not a keyboard player. I'm not a guitar player. I'm not a bass player. So that was kind of, whistle or hum the thing that you want to hear, and then hopefully you can find the notes on the keyboard, right? But that was my process back then, and it kind of really still is. And I haven't looked back. Like I kind of found my niche. One of the things I was doing was like with the stuff that I'm doing now. Really, I'm passionate about, because like as much as I like prog music, I'm even more into like synthesizer kind of industrial kind of stuff. So it really struck a chord with me that I was able to kind of pull it off to some extent anyway, to create this music that I'm doing now. So that's where I'm at right now is, it seems like I've met with some degree of success with that. So that I'm really happy about that, because ultimately all I was doing was creating music that I wanted to hear, music that I like to listen to. That's what I was creating as best I could.
Yeah.
And other people are digging it. So that's really cool.
As a drummer, do you find that this music that you've created now is very like beat and rhythm heavy, just because you have that background where that's been sort of your main instrument until now?
It is beat heavy, but surprisingly, a a lot of the stuff is like programmed drums, and a
Right.
lot of people are thinking, what are you doing? Like, you're a drummer. Why are you doing that? And like, all cards on the table, like I'm not like a virtuoso musician or anything. I played in a prog band. It's very demanding. But what's even more demanding in the kind of music that I'm doing is that I need drums that have to be like clockwork, and I don't have that precision of meter to play along with an arpeggiator or a sequencer and that kind of thing. So
Sure.
it makes more sense for me to program it and line it up with the other programming and stuff to make it work more efficiently. There are tunes that I've done that are me playing the drums, like the song Redacted. That's me on the drums. Like, there's no arpeggiators, there's no programmed drums. I'm using a Roland V kit.
Okay.
So that saved me the trouble of actually miking my acoustic kit.
Yeah, you just plug it right in.
Exactly. At some point, I'll probably tackle miking the entire drum kit at some point, and doing the hybrid acoustic electronic thing with the drum kit. But my prowess in the studio isn't at that point just yet. So I'll likely learn how to do that, sort of start experimenting, and then maybe tackle that at some point in the future. But right now, it's just way easier for me to use my Roland V kit and record the drum bits that I want to do, and then add my synths on top of that.
Okay. Well, fair enough. So you mentioned a few minutes ago, and I was going to bring this up too, is the industrial kind of vibe to a lot of this, and a lot of this is that's definitely the kind of the genre that jumped out at me when listening to some of your stuff. What is that? How long have you been into that kind of music? Like, has that always been something that you've been a fan of?
Yeah, when I was a kid, the first tune of like I was listening to the pioneers of that stuff. Like, the first time I heard Gary Numan play the song Metal from the album The Pleasure Principle, that was back in 1980.
Yeah.
I was a young kid, but I was absolutely blown away by this guy, because he sounded unlike anything that was out there. He sounded so futuristic, so out there, so cool. It was like, man, this guy has got something going on. I don't know what it is, but it is. Like, it gives me goosebumps on my arms, like, when I hear this stuff, because it's so cool. It's so, the sounds he's using and stuff. The industrial aspect kind of happened much later, probably 10, 15 years later, when bands like Skinny Puppy and Frontline Assembly, Front 242, and it's like hearing what they're doing with synthesizers and stuff, and particularly Nine Inch Nails, where they would incorporate it. It's kind of like, if you look at it from a cinematic standpoint, and I'm going on a tangent here, but bear with me. It's like if you watch like vintage Star Trek movies, not the cheesy TV series or anything, which I love, but anyway, everything has got a very clean aesthetic. Everything's tidy, nothing's filthy, everything's very cool and tidy. Then you watch a movie like Alien or Star Wars, and you look in the background, and computers are kind of beat up and mashed up, and there's dirt and there's grime, and that's the aesthetic, the oral aesthetic that Nine Inch Nails brought to the table. It got rid of this clean, sanitized synthesizer kind of vibe, and introduced something angry and dirty and gritty and grungy.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely brilliant. It took what Gary Numan was doing in the 70s and kind of brought it up to a more modern, more almost dystopian kind of feel, which really opened my eyes too, and it still does. Like, I know that Nine Inch Nails kind of fell by the wayside, like they're not irrelevant, but they've had their heyday, and now they're doing movie soundtracks and stuff, which is something I think is incredibly cool. But their stamp on my approach to writing music has remained. That kind of adding that bit of dirt to it. So like a song like Redacted for me is kind of like almost like a punk, like Motorhead kind of tune, but it's all synthesizers.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like it's got this grungy, dirty, smack you upside the head kind of thing. It's got the immediate primitivism as punk music has, but it's all synthesizers and it's all synthetic and very much in a I don't know, kind of Matrix kind of world kind of deal.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about the computers and Alien and things like that too, as having that similar kind of aesthetic. Because I think you're right. I think it's taking something that is super very clean, and then just dirtying it right up to the point where it almost makes something very very machine like, but also very human. Like that punk thing is about as human as you can get, where it's just all emotion and all raw power. And then you pair that with something that's very mechanical and robotic, and it definitely comes up with something unique for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's fair to say that when you look at a lot of the stuff that I'm doing with Neuroshock, that you can hear punk in it, you can hear industrial music in it, you can hear 80s new wave,
Yeah,
you can hear Motorhead in it, but there's also an angle of cinematography and like movie soundtrack kind of thing going on too, which I'm a huge fan of. Like when I watch movies, I mean it's probably pretty obvious that I'm a huge sci-fi fan. I think when you listen to my music, you can get sort of that vibe, and some of the samples I've pulled from movie soundtracks
yeah.
that show up in some of the bits um, are an homage to that. But when you hear some of the themes and where I'm going with some of the music, it's like, oh yeah, this guy has spent a lot of time watching science fiction films, and he's been paying attention to the soundtracks and whatnot, and you can hear that in the music that I'm creating.
Is that
And
something you do deliberately though? I mean, or is that something that just kind of subconsciously comes into the music because you've watched so many of these movies and you've sort of absorbed the soundtracks?
I think very much it was sort of an osmosis thing. Um, when I watch a science fiction film and you look at the cinematography, you look at the sets, you look at the feel of the piece, the set, like the production design, the art design of a film, and for me, I start hearing musical themes in my own head, not necessarily the soundtrack of the film, but what would I do?
Yeah,
What would I do with this kind of thing? And I start thinking about it, and then I come downstairs to the studio, and I think, okay, what sounds come to mind? What sound design? What noises can I create that would sort of tip of the hat to that kind of a visual feel,
yeah,
right? So you have a picture on your television screen, you're watching it. What what message is that giving me as a musician musically, right? Without regard to the composer of the original soundtrack, what am I hearing as sound design when I go downstairs and think of this film or whatever, or the feel or an emotion the film has elicited from me
yeah.
to create music, and that's I'm rambling a bit, but that's
No,
that's kind of my it's kind of my train of thought. It's a very complex, jumbled kind of machine that works in my head, but like visual triggers are very strong with me. Like I can look at an object and think, what is this object saying to me visually, and how can I translate that visual thing to an oral thing, like a soundscape of some kind. And these soundscapes are the starting point for a lot of my tracks,
yeah,
like liminal spaces or critical mass, which is about somebody just losing it, like being pushed to the absolute limit. And it's a very dark sound, but that's like where do these feelings come from, and like what imaginations, like I do like to explore that, the darker side of things, because and this may come to a surprise to you, but lots of times when like it's a weekend and it's like just relaxing and stuff like that, what do I listen to? I don't listen to this dark shit. Like I don't listen to my own stuff. Like I'd rather listen to some like totally traditional Mexican mariachi music. You know,
Right.
it's happy, it's cheerful. It's like, wow, this is great. So I'm gonna have a couple of beers, eat some enchiladas, have a good time, listen to this mariachi band, and then later in the week, I'm going to sit downstairs and just enter into like the darkest side of human character kind of thing. And I think the two keep me balanced. That like emotionally, you've got that balance, and then you've got the film or the object or the whatever visual translation in your head to like an oral landscape kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that a lot of people, I almost think we'd be better off if we could hear more of how different people would soundtrack pieces of film or video, just because I think everyone, when they see something without sound, they have their own kind of mental image, I guess, of what that scene sounds like. I don't know if you're familiar with local jazz guitarist Keith Price, but he did a new soundtrack for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly that he hadn't seen the movie before, and he wrote a complete new soundtrack.
Brilliant.
And performed it live, and a lot of it was improvised. It's a jazz thing, and it's so cool. It's one of the coolest local records I have, just because it's. I mean, I'm so familiar with that soundtrack because I've seen the movie 100 times, and just hearing this completely like out there take on it by someone who is experiencing it for the first time, and I love the idea of that. Of just sort of like, this is what's in someone else's head when they're seeing this piece of art.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly it. That you got to send me the link to that, by the way.
I will. I definitely will. It's great.
That sounds really cool. That sounds really, really cool.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my take. I've never felt like I've had the virtuosity, the technical skill. Like I'm kind of a one-trick pony, like with my drum kit and stuff like that. But with Neuroshock, I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to do, and so it's been a lot of work learning how to use a DAW, learning how to master music and mix music and stuff like that, even with my hearing, the way it's absolutely butchered from years and years of playing the drums, right?
Yeah.
But I love that idea of taking a film that you've seen or whatever, and doing your own soundtrack, or a movie you haven't seen, and doing a soundtrack to it and that kind of thing. For me, like the visual part is kind of like a building block, right? Like you have ideas in your head. Like I said, like if I could be flicking through an art book, one of those Taschen art books of. It could be a perfect example would be Hieronymus Bosch or H.R. Giger. Okay. You know, you look at his artwork and it's like, okay, this stuff's crazy. And if you look at Giger, the first thing you think of is Alien. Of course, it's going to be creepy and weird and stuff. And with the Bosch, you know, it's kind of the same thing too, but you don't have that frame of reference that you do with the Giger with Alien. So you're kind of on your own. So what kind of hellish landscape are you going to create with your soundscapes? You know, and with for example, Critical Mass, there was two things. One thing with Critical Mass, the track Critical Mass, was a friend of mine said on Facebook. She sent me a note saying, "Hey, are you aware that NASA was able to take the sound of a black hole?" And I said, well, there's no sound in space. Yeah. But what they did was they extrapolated waveforms, you know, like electromagnetic pulses coming from this black hole, and they kind of transmogrified it by, you know, like obviously taking it out of the realm of the unheard electromagnetic spectrum into an aural spectrum where you could actually hear something. And you know, like some software and blah 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 blah. This is what it would sound like if you could hear a black hole. And you know, there's a lot of extrapolation. But one of the things that I got on some of my studio software was the software that provided that sound. And it's like, oh, hell yeah. I can totally do something with that.
Yeah,
The
for sure.
black hole, right? What goes in a black hole stays in a black hole. Right? But so, like, what the hell am I going to do with this really weird sound? So I had this challenge. Hey, can you do a tune with this weird noise? I'm like, fuck yeah, I could totally do that. Like I can figure something out. And it's like, wow, like, to quote Spinal Tap, a black hole, like it's none more black, right? None more.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's got to be a pretty dark tune. So Critical Mass became that really dark tune of somebody just kind of being pushed to their critical mass point where they totally lose it. And it's not a violent tune, but it's certainly dark. It's got a real vibe to it, and it's got this black hole noise to it. And
That's
and
cool.
that was the start. That was the starting point for the whole track. Was, what am I going to do with this really dark sound? This really, the end of the universe, literally, kind of noise and mystery and scariness and everything else. What am I going to
Yeah,
do with it? And so Critical Mass was the end result of that one.
that's awesome. What is sort of the next step with this then? I mean, I know obviously you could be in your studio here recording music forever and putting out releases, but is this something that you want to sort of turn into more of a like immersive kind of audio visual thing, or are you content just sort of releasing music as you are now?
Uh, there is an audiovisual aspect to it because almost all of the tunes I do come with a video,
Right.
and I put them up onto YouTube, and I do that in lieu of gigging, which I don't know if I can gig, like, because the tunes are sonically complicated. I think if I sat down and figured it out, I could probably figure it out. But at this point, I just don't have the bandwidth to
Yeah.
figure it out. I want to keep creating tunes. So for now, in the foreseeable future, it'll be a studio gig. And in the near future, I'm already working on album number 2. Like,
Oh, cool.
I'm already a couple of tracks in, and just tweaking and stuff like that. In fact, before this call with you this evening, I was noodling around with some stuff that's untitled just yet, but just kind of mucking around with some stuff. I have the intention to do an EP of tunes that have a decidedly 80s kind of vibe to it, like the track Memory Oxide and the track You Are Liquid didn't make it onto the album Reactance Bias for that very reason, because they had a very 80s vibe to it.
Okay.
I have a couple more tracks that have an 80s vibe to it, so I expect at some point in the future I'll likely release that as an EP. And as a tip of the hat to what we discussed earlier, listening to these old Gary Numan records, like
Yeah.
The Pleasure Principle and Telecon and Replicas and stuff like that, which were enormously formative to what I'm doing today. And I couldn't just let it go by without some kind of an homage, to that, because you got this synthesizer with all these great sounds on it. It's like, hey, this sounds like Gary Numan
Yeah.
when he
Yeah.
did this song or that song. It's like, well, I got to do a track that's employing some of these sounds, because it's one of those things. It's stuff you grew up with. It's like the kid who listened to Metallica his entire life and decided, yeah, I'm gonna put out this kick-ass metal tune that sounds a bit like Dyer's Eve or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
Or
stuff that stays with you, right? It's something that's so embedded in your kind of like musical vocabulary just because of the time and place when you first heard it. I think everyone has that. They have an artist or an album or a bunch of albums that really stick with them, and you can't get rid of it. Like, it's just sort of embedded in your DNA, and that sounds like that's what this is for you.
that's exactly right. And like cursed or not, I'm stuck with a whole pile of uh, genres that I grew up with that
Yeah,
aren't typically found living together in the same ecosystem. Like, I love Motorhead. I like the Dead Kennedys. I like Rush. I like Genesis and King Crimson. And I like Nine Inch Nails and Gary Numan and Ultravox and all these other bands, but none of them, like, it's like, what? How can you be into Ultravox and be into, the Dead Kennedys or like, what's wrong with you? It's like, well, it's my shtick, and I'm a huge goth fan. I love goth music, like Clan of Zymox and Sisters of Mercy and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I love the vibe. I love that feel. And for me as a musician, as a drummer, should make that distinction. I have a huge breadth of influences that I draw upon very regularly, and I think that is a big part of what keeps my stuff imaginative and fresh to some extent, as much as it can be for the lack of my ability when I'm laying down tracks and stuff, is that I'm drawing upon all these hugely diverse influences to create music.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the good thing about this being a podcast too is I know you said you're working on new stuff, and by the time someone hears this, maybe they'll hear it the day it comes out, maybe they'll hear it a year from now, and by then, who knows what kind of stuff you've released. But where can people find what you have out now? I mean, I know you mentioned you have YouTube videos. What's the best way to sort of track down your music at this point in time?
Well, at this point in time, my preferred thing is Bandcamp, because the artist gets a better cut of things, and what Spotify is doing to artists these days is pretty horrible.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
You will find my music on Spotify. You'll find it on Apple Music, Deezer, Pandora, like all the major streaming services. You'll find it there. But Bandcamp, they still have some ethos of fairness towards the musician, and they know without artists they have nothing. So
yeah,
they seem to treat artists a lot better. Spotify, I think they have the lowest return for artists of pretty much any of the major streaming services.
Yeah, I think I saw a chart and they were right at the bottom with like 0.0000 something.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And their audio fidelity doesn't come close to streaming services like Tidal, for instance,
Sure.
or even Apple Music. So, but you can find my music on all those things. And on December the 11th this month, the album the Reactance Bias will be released on all those platforms as well. So for now, you can get it on Bandcamp. The one single that I did a video, Trash Head, is on YouTube right now as a new video, along with pretty much all the other tracks that I've done have videos with it. And then with the Reactance Bias, there's three more as yet unreleased tracks. One is called Discard Me, I Am a Lie. One is called Trash Head, and the other one is called Engineered to Fail. And these tracks will be available on the new album as a package. That'll be released on the 11th of December as I embark on creating more music for the Neuroshock next album. Cool. I don't have a title for it yet.
Cool. Well, the good thing is this will come out shortly after that, so that it'll already, by the time people hear this, it'll already be out. They can get it on whatever platform that they want to get it on.
Yeah.
As far as finding out what you're up to, when it comes to new singles or maybe a new EP, like you mentioned, where can people follow you online?
The best place right now is either Instagram or on Facebook. I had a website. It was proving to be a bit expensive, and it was the old Providence website. I had a sub page with my stuff on it, but Providence sadly has kind of faded from the spotlight a bit. I encourage anybody who likes prog rock to go check it out, because there's some cool stuff. It's pretty indulgent and weird and whatever. You've heard it. It's strange.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
But this new stuff, at some point I'll probably do a website and put up more material on there. But for now, you can get updates on news on Manitoba Music. I have a profile on Manitoba Music. YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook are probably the three best places. I left Twitter probably 6 months ago, when it started to look like it was going to turn into a cesspool of nastiness.
Yeah. And it is that now. Yeah.
It was like, check please. I'm out of here. No thanks. So it hasn't caused me to suffer at all. So like Facebook seems to be working out very well. And the really great thing about Facebook, I just got to say this, Facebook has an amazing community of musicians. Like Winnipeg doesn't have much of an electronic music scene, and what they call an electronic music scene is mostly DJs doing remixes and DJs doing their thing, but it's not the actual creators of the electronic music. There's none of that kind of a scene. So there's kind of a gray area between the DJs and the electronic music, and the technology is blurring the lines a little bit, right, between these two factions. But like for a real electronic scene, and I don't know how to describe my music, like industrial, I don't know, whatever, it's noise. So if there's a difficult labeling issue that's going on here, what do you call it, right? Like electronic music or DJing or whatever. But what Facebook has been doing that really works is that you encounter either like-minded people. Like I found two other bands in Winnipeg that have been really supportive. One is Lost Cause Industry. I'd urge you to check those guys out too. Well, he's a single guy like myself,
right?
Like a solo artist. That's what I mean. And Plains Desperate Symphony, two local Winnipeg acts that are like, they seem to be like solo guys like me, you know, going into their basements or wherever their studio is and making weird noises and stuff like that and having a good time with it. They've been enormously supportive. And not just those guys, but like in a worldwide thing, there's been a pile of people on Facebook creating these communities that are just unbelievable. So there was a time when I felt, geez, you know, I kind of feel like I'm the only guy making weird noises in his basement. And it's like, no, man, like there's hundreds of other dudes all over the world in their basements making weird noises. And some of these noises are friggin' fantastic. Like there's this band in Germany called that Sfumato Effect, and they've been hugely supportive, that following my stuff and like trading gossip and talking about music and stuff like that, which has been enormously gratifying for me and validating for me, because I've never felt really validated as a musician other than a guy who gets behind the drum kit, makes a hell of a noise and does his prog noise stuff.
Yeah.
And now I've found this community, this tribe of like-minded people. It's been pretty spectacular. I've really liked it. Another one is Arcane Synthetic, and I think they're from Australia. Same thing, like just a terrific community of people where you can bounce off ideas and stuff like that. And
yeah.
You know, like I typically tend to wall myself up and try to isolate myself so that the ideas that come up with are pretty pure. They're pure me, right? But I am keen to hear, you know, little bits and tidbits of what other people are up to and stuff like that. And one that comes to mind is a band called Clank from Paris, France. Brilliant stuff. Like they have this one track called Poudre, and they're French, obviously. So the song is in French and stuff, and regrettably, I don't remember enough of my high school French to understand the lyrics, but like sonically, like brilliant stuff. And I wish these guys would be all in Winnipeg so I could hang out, go for a coffee with them. And
well, you know what
I mean?
I think the good thing just over the course of doing this show for like a decade, there are other people in Winnipeg, and I'm going to send you some links after we finish talking, that are doing similar things. But it's the same deal, right? They're in a basement, they're making crazy music, and it's maybe not getting heard by the right people. But I think that's kind of definitely one of the benefits of the internet is you find your people. But yeah, so I'm glad you're doing this, and people should definitely check out what you're up to.